Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, a nice Russian welcome. Thank you very much to the British Council and Olga and her team for inviting me and for the splendid organization of this conference. I've been particularly impressed not just with the coffee breaks and the organization of the conference itself, but with the way they've organized the weather. That's been wonderful. Thank you very much. I live in Spain, in Barcelona, so I am used to blue skies, and it's very nice to come here and find beautiful blue skies for the duration of the conference. It's lovely to be in Moscow. This is not my first trip. It's one of my favorite capital cities in the world. And one of the things that always sticks in my mind about Moscow is that apparently there are more billionaires living in this city than in any other city in the world. So I'm thinking statistically there's probably a couple of billionaires in the room. Is that the case? No? No, I think language teachers probably were not falling within that particular demographic. Anyway, it is lovely to be here. So I live in Spain. I'm originally from South Africa. And I want to talk to you very briefly about this country, which you probably recognize. Do we have any Canadians by any chance? I'm thinking probably not, but if we do have any Canadians, put up your hand. No, okay. How about people who've visited Canada? Could you put up your hand? Few of you. Okay, how about people who would like to visit Canada? Put up your hand. Or everybody else. Good. Yes, it's a beautiful country. I have family who live in Canada, and I just want to start the plenary by telling you a little bit about myself. You know how often the plenary speaker just goes straight into the kind of session? I think it's always interesting to have some personal information about the speaker. So, I was born in South Africa, I live in Spain, I have family in Canada. Last summer, I went to visit my cousin who lives in Vancouver on the west coast. Now, Vancouver is part of a province called British Columbia. And that geographical area, British Columbia, down over the border into the States, into Seattle area, has a specific geographical name. Do you know what it is? It's kind of like it has its own microclimate, its own fauna and flora and so on. Do you know what it's called? It's called the Pacific... No? No. None of you studied geography, I can see at school. It's called the Pacific Northwest. And it's that whole kind of western area of Canada and going down into the States. Now, it's a very interesting area. It has its own specific climate, as I said, you know, animals and so on. Now, because I'm interested in hiking, when I went to Vancouver, before I went, I decided to look into the kinds of hiking that I could do, the kinds of animals that I might be able to see. And I found that there are some very interesting endangered species in the area of the Pacific Northwest. You're wondering where this is going. It is going somewhere. Let's see if you recognize them. What's that one? Top left. A wolf, yeah. Top right. Not quite a lynx. The lynx has kind of long ears here. A pussycat. No. It's actually called a cougar. I think sometimes also referred to as a mountain lion, and it's specific to North America. Bottom right? Yeah, the bald eagle. Bottom left? Yeah, the humpback whale, in fact. And these are all endangered species. What about that one? Yeah, exactly. It's an octopus. But you'll notice that it's in a tree. Now, this is a very interesting animal. These are all endangered species, and this is the most endangered of them all, and the one that you may not have heard of, because it's so unusual and so little known. And it's called the Pacific Northwest, from the geographical region, the Pacific Northwest tree octopus, because it lives in trees. Well, of course, it doesn't always live in trees. It lives in water as well, but it spends quite a lot of its time in trees. It's only found in an area called the Olympic Peninsula, which is a national park near Seattle. Now, when I did my research before going to Vancouver, I thought this was fascinating. I'd never heard of the Pacific Northwest tree octopus. So I did lots of reading about it and so on, and I went, and unfortunately I didn't get to see Pacific Northwest tree octopus, although I did get to see eagles. There are quite a few of them. We went whale watching. I didn't see a wolf, and I didn't see a cougar, and I didn't see the elusive tree octopus. But because it is such a little known creature, I would like to share with you what I found out about it. Well, I've already told you where it lives. It lives in the Pacific Northwest, and specifically in the Olympic Peninsula only. Okay, not very well known for that reason. Its habitat, as you saw from the photo, is a rainforest. What do you think about the average size from the photo that you saw? How many centimeters, more or less? Guess. 15? Anybody think bigger or smaller? Smaller? Okay, well, in fact, it's 30 to 35 centimeters, including the tentacles, which would be what? About that, I think? Yeah. So not that big, in fact. Its tentacles, what do you think it uses its tentacles for? Climbing trees, of course, yeah. And? Food, exactly. What it does is uses the tentacles to catch very small insects, which also forms part of its diet. And now this is very interesting. It uses its tentacles to pick up small, shiny objects that catch its fancy, that it finds interesting. Because, as you probably know, octopuses are very intelligent creatures. The usual skin color you saw from the photo. It can change. It can be various colors. The main color is brown, as you saw. It actually reacts to how it feels emotionally. And I think this is fascinating. For example, if the tree octopus feels fear, it turns a kind of whitish color. And if it feels anger, it turns a kind of a reddish color. Isn't that interesting? Amazing. Predators. What animals do you think prey on the tree octopus? Yeah, so wild animals, eagles particularly, right? Birds of prey, large birds of prey like eagles, and also apparently what they call foreign species, so cats or dogs that get into the area, although they're not native to the area. One way you could help save the species. Now, there are lots of suggestions for this online. For example, you could sign an online petition. You could let your friends and family know about it. You could put a tentacle ribbon on your website. I'm going to show you what that is in a minute, so you can make people more aware. And my particular favorite is that in your schools, as you were all teachers, in your schools, you can let the children or your university students know about the octopus, and you can organize tree octopus awareness days. And these are particularly effective if you organize a kind of a march through your city. So we could have like a number of schools in Moscow organizing marches through some of your wonderful avenues, to raise awareness with placards. And it's particularly effective if you have people actually dressed up as tree octopuses. So you yourselves could actually get yourselves into a kind of tree octopus costume and really draw people's attention to all of this. Do you believe me? Yeah, you're all starting to look at me a bit kind of, this is sounding really weird. It is sounding really weird. I'm afraid the tree octopus does not exist. Yeah, sorry. Did you believe me? Put up your hand. I really tried. I really tried. Yeah, I tried to be convincing. They all believed me. I love it. Good. Okay. No, I did try to be convincing. Although I invented all of that, it wasn't me who invented it. The website exists, and all of the information that I've given you comes from this website. Now, if you are online, if you have a connection or a tablet, feel free to quickly Google Pacific Northwest Tree Octopus, and you'll find the website, and you can have a look at it. Now, it's a really great website. It's beautifully put together, very funny. If we just go back to the beginning, the way I started this plenary, what I've done with you is an introduction to a reading class with EFL students. So if we go back to the first thing I did after I talked about Moscow, I kind of started with an anecdote. I mentioned Canada, my cousin who lives in Vancouver, and this is true. I did go to Vancouver, and I did go to the Olympic Peninsula near Seattle, but I didn't see any tree octopi. So my way into the topic was a personal anecdote, which was true. But then the second stage, what was the stage after the anecdote? This is if you were listening. I had those photos, remember, of the endangered animals, the 4 or the 5 endangered animals, and I slipped in the octopus there with some real ones, so that was a little bit more convincing, hopefully, okay? So after the pictures, and I kind of introduced the animal, what did we do next? Do you remember? Lovely. We did a prediction activity. I gave you the habitat. You had to guess the size, what they use tentacles for, and so on. So basically, an average or typical prediction activity. So the next stage in the lesson is, of course, the students look at the website. They read the website. Now, of course, this is a screenshot. I realize you can't read it, but students would need now to have access to it. So depending on my context, whether I have access to technology or the students have access to technology or not, there are a number of ways to give them the website. The first one would be a kind of what we call a high resource context, where your students like you now have devices or tablets or maybe laptops in pairs, or maybe you have a computer room in your school or your university. But students in pairs can go to the website and have a look. If you're in a high resource context, could you put up your hand? Not very many of you. Okay, that's very, very much the minority. Okay, the second context would be more like what we call a low resource context, which would be like this, where the teacher has a computer connected to the internet, and then we could look as a class at the website together. So a low resource context where you have a connection in your classroom and one computer, the teacher's computer. If you're in a low resource context, could you hold up your hand? A few more. Okay, that looks like almost the majority. And then finally, the no resource context, where there is no technology in the school, your students have no technology, and there are no connections whatsoever. Are you anybody in a no resource context? Few of you, probably about 5 or 6. Okay. So obviously for each of these contexts, there's a different way you do the stage. If your students are in a high resource context with access, they look at the website in pairs and they check their predictions. They check how long it is, what color it is, all that stuff that I told you. If you're in a low resource context, then as a class, you look at the website together. And if you're in a no resource context, you can take in handouts of the main page where all of the information is. So there are different ways to do it. You can still take this into your classroom. Okay, so we've had the prediction, then we have the reading of the website to check our predictions. And up to this point, it's a very typical EFL lesson, isn't it? There's nothing different here to what we've been doing for several decades now. The next stage is where we do something that is perhaps a little different to what we normally do. We get the students to look again at the website. They've now looked at the website and checked that they've understood what it's about, and you've told them, or they've guessed, that the tree octopus is nonsense. Now we get them to analyze the website according to each of these kind of features, if you like. So again, I mean, you know, the students would do this in pairs, and then you would get feedback, but we don't have time for that, apart from the fact that you can't see this very clearly. So we'll do it very quickly as a group, so you can see what I mean. So the first thing is, students look at the layout of the website, the font used, and the colors used, and they decide whether that makes the site or the information look more credible or less credible, more believable or less believable. So let's see what we think. Look at the layout. We've got a kind of column here. That's a tentacle ribbon, by the way. Remember I mentioned you could put a tentacle ribbon on your website to raise awareness. That's what it looks like. We've got a column here, we've got main information here, we have a column here, and we have tabs. So it's actually a site, it's not a page, it has a number of different pages. Okay, so layout. If you think this makes it look more believable, then I want you to do this. If you think it makes it look less believable, then I want you to do this, and we'll see as a group whether we think it's more or less. So the layout, what do you think, more or less? More, most people agree. Yeah, I mean, it's a typical kind of layout, right? Tabs across the top and columns. But what about the font? Look at that font here. We've got red here. We've got a sort of here on an arc. And the style is a slightly comic, kids style sort of. Looks to me like a comic rather than an official website. So what do you think? More believable or less believable? Let's see. Yeah, I think less. I mean, especially with the red. It's red on a dark background is against all web standards for a start. And also this kind of curve doesn't really work. The colors. This is light green and this is actually dark green. It looks like black in the screenshot, but it's dark green. What do you think? More believable, less believable? Yeah, people are kind of divided here. You could argue that green is like an eco-friendly environmental color, but usually an official website will be a white background with black text or black background with white text. So if you compare this to the World Wildlife Fund, for example, you'll notice that the font and the colors is very different. Okay, what about the style of language? Now I realize you can't read this, but when you get home and you have a look at the site, read it, and you'll notice very quickly that the language is quite tongue-in-cheek. It's not very serious. And you get a kind of a feeling that it's all a bit of an elaborate joke, which is what it is. Now, because you are proficient language users, you will spot that very fast. But students don't generally notice that unless they have a pretty high level, upper, intermediate, or above. They won't spot that. But the style of the language is another clue. The content in the tabs across here, we have an information page, this one, FAQs, or frequently asked questions. We have sightings, where people talk about where they've seen the Olympic, the Pacific Northwest tree octopus, and surprisingly, it's been seen as far away as Japan, and you can see photos of the Japanese one in there. Media has YouTube videos, footage of the tree octopus in action, and that's really worth seeing. It's obviously a dead octopus, somebody's put it in a tree, and then they've got some fishing wire, off camera, to sort of move the tentacles around, and there's a kind of a, Richard Attenborough sort of, David Attenborough commentary over it. Really, really nice. And then we have activities, so things that you can do to help spread the word. So what do you think? The content in the tabs make this more believable or less believable? What do you think? More or less. Okay, kind of more in theory because it's a website, but if you start looking at the YouTube videos, you soon realize that it's all a bit of a joke. Okay, hyperlinks. Now this is interesting. On this first page here, the information page, we have a hyperlink in the second line which says temperate rainforests. You click on that hyperlink and you go to a Wikipedia page that tells you about temperate rainforests, which clearly are real things, they do exist. In the second paragraph, we have a link down here which says coniferous Olympic rainforests. And it talks again, it's from Wikipedia, gives you information about the Olympic Peninsula National Park, which is a real place where supposedly the tree octopus lives. Okay, so these two hyperlinks in this text, does that to you make it more believable or less? Let's see. Most people agree more, because it does actually take you to real information about real stuff. So the idea is to make it more believable. But now let's just imagine in this first paragraph here, we have one hyperlink. Imagine if we had 15 hyperlinks, or 10 hyperlinks, just here. What would the effect be on the reader? It would be a very different experience to read that with 10 hyperlinks. First of all, every time you read hyperlinked text, you're constantly going through these sort of split-second decisions. What's it linking to? Should I click on it? Should I not? Even though that's not conscious, it slows down your reading. And they've done research looking at the retention of text that is hyperlinked, overly hyperlinked, very little hyperlinked, and not hyperlinked. And they've looked at retention between three groups with the same text. And the results are probably not that surprising. The text with no hyperlinking on testing later, that group had better retention of the content. And the text that had the most hyperlinks, the group had the least retention of the content. And I'm sure you've had this experience yourself. When you read hyperlinked text online, and then you click again, and the next thing you're off somewhere else, and you've completely forgotten what you were doing. In fact, there's a wonderful verb for this on the internet called wilfing, W-I-L-F, to wilf. And you can probably guess what that is. What was I looking for? What was I looking for? End of somewhere else. So over-hyperlinking is an important concept, or under-hyperlinking or hyperlinking just the right amount is important. I think probably well done here. Okay, the use of images, you can see there's an image of the tree octopus, and further down on the main page, there's a little map of the Olympic Peninsula, which does exist. So what do you think? Images and maps on this site makes it more believable or less? Let's see, more. Yeah, I would say more. I mean, they're real. They look like real photos, and they are a map to a real place. Okay. Links to official organizations, again, these are down here on the main page. We have like the World Wildlife Fund, National Geographic. More believable, less believable? More, yeah, of course, real organizations. News updates again here, latest spottings of the tree octopus, latest activities. More believable or less? I agree, more, because it's a site that's kept up to date with interesting information about the elusive tree octopus. Okay, so you can see what we've done. We've taken a reading text, we've got the students to examine it for content, right, prediction, and then reading to check their predictions. And now we're analyzing it in a slightly different way, and we're having a speaking activity with the students, first in pairs and then as a class. what we've done now is we've kind of moved the lesson away and we've focused on something that we don't normally focus on in English language teaching, and that is digital literacies. So I wanted to kind of start this plenary with an example of what digital literacies actually mean in the classroom. And I'm going to come back to the tree octopus a little bit later, but just to continue the lesson, we don't stop with the analysis. The next stage is we put students in pairs, we give them pairs of websites. One of them is a fake website, one of them is a real website. They have to use these criteria, and they have to analyze the true website and the fake website. You don't tell them which is which. They have to decide which is fake and which is real. And then they regroup and they share their findings. So we kind of take it a step further. They apply these criteria to website analysis. So that's a whole hour or even an hour and a half class, depending on your students. At the end of the talk, I'm going to give you a link to where you can download the Tree Octopus lesson plan in PDF format. And it has all of these stages, plus the pairs of fake and real websites. So you can try this out with your students if you'd like to. Okay, so that's a complete lesson that is focusing on digital literacies. There's just one thing we didn't look at, though. What's that? Yeah, it's the URL. It's the web address of this website. And look at it. Does that make it more believable or less? I think we're all in agreement. Less. Yeah, I mean, look at it. Actually, this site was set up by a man called Lyle Zapotti. And he did this as a kind of a joke. He wasn't a teacher or anything. He just thought it would be fun to do. And it's being used by educators all over the world. It was picked up by the educational community. But it was set up as a kind of elaborate joke, an elaborate hoax. And this is his personal website. And you can tell that because of the .net as well. So probably the first thing we look at when we're trying to evaluate the veracity or the truthfulness of a website is we look at the extension, what's called the extension. So .net, .org, .com, .edu, those pieces of information tell us a lot about the site. And here, this is a key piece of information. Now, this may sound obvious to you as adults, but to our younger learners, this is not what they often first look at. So there are generations of school children who've looked at this website and believed every single word that they have read, okay? And indeed, generations of adults, as you just have. Okay, what are digital literacies? I want to give you a sort of quick overview of what's involved, and then I want to show you a couple more activities of how you can bring this into the classroom, because I think that's the interesting part. I think we probably all agree we need to be digitally literate these days. But what does that mean? Well, you probably realize there are a lot of skills out there that we need to acquire now in the 21st century. We're going to look at sort of 4 areas. This one is focus on information. I can see red on black is not great with the light here. These are 3 sort of sub-skills or sub-literacies that are important. Search literacy, we have to be able to search. Tagging, we have to be able to tag our photos or media or text or blog posts or whatever correctly. And information literacy. And what we have just looked at with the tree octopus is basic information literacy. This is probably the most important literacy and the one that you need to start with. Students need to be able to not just find, so search for, information, they must be able to evaluate that information. They must be able to check the veracity, the provenance, understand where it's coming from and what the agenda behind it is. This is absolutely fundamental. So the tree octopus is a kind of way in, if you like, to evaluating information that you find online. That's the first sort of area, a focus on information. The second one is a focus on language. Here it says language. This is probably sort of our main area, isn't it, as language teachers. We have print literacy, which is what we've always been taught at school. When we were at school, we all learned to read and write, and that as a skill is still as important as it ever was. But print literacy now is something slightly different as well with the internet. So it's not just that we read books and magazines and newspapers, which we read fewer and fewer of. We also need to understand online text types or genres. For example, the kind of text and convention used in a tweet, the kind of texts and conventions used in Facebook updates, texts and conventions used in blog posts. All that kind of stuff is equally important now. I don't want to go through all of these in detail, but just to mention here, hypertext. Hypertext literacy is the example that I gave you about hyperlinking in the octopus text. So when you're producing online texts, blog posts or whatever they might be, you need to be careful about your hyperlinking. You need to know not just how to create a hyperlink in your blog post, yeah, you select and then you link and then you type in the URL and then you click save. That's not difficult. It's not difficult to create a hyperlink. You have to think about what you're hyperlinking to and also how much you're hyperlinking and what the effect is on the reader. And this kind of sums up what digital literacies are. Basically, on the one hand, they're sort of technical, if you like, skills, which is how to create the hyperlink. But on the other hand, they are also an awareness of the social practices that surround the use of this particular skill, hyperlinking in this case. The social practices and the effect on the reader with this example. That's equally important. It's not enough to know just how to hyperlink. You need to know about the effect on the reader and the effect you are trying to create. If I hyperlink every 5th word in my blog post, it looks like I don't know what I'm talking about. I have to keep kind of referring to other people because I have no authority myself, so I kind of undermine my own authorial voice. These are things to keep in mind. Multimedia, obviously, being able to manipulate not just text, but video and images. We're going to come back to that. Code literacy I want to mention here because that looks sort of scary and awful. Is there anybody in the room who knows how to code? Could you put up your hand? Ooh, well, a lot of you. More. At least 10 people, I'd say. Okay. Usually I find, working with teachers, nobody knows how to code. I certainly don't know how to code, but I consider myself fairly tech literate and tech savvy. I say I don't know how to code. I know enough about code to be able to do what I want to do. For example, I have a professional blog, and a couple of months ago, I wanted to upload an image to the sidebar, the side column of my blog of a new book title. So I got the image and so on. I went into the admin panel. I uploaded the image. I clicked save. I went back to my blog page, and suddenly the image was this huge thing, and it threw out the whole kind of formatting of the blog. It was this enormous, oversized thing that made the column all kind of move over to the left and look absolutely dreadful. Right? It looked dreadful. So I went back into the admin panel. I went to where I'd uploaded it. I clicked on the HTML, which is the code bit. I had a look at it, and you see this kind of impenetrable bunch of letters and stuff, and I sort of looked through it, and I found a bit that said width equals 250, length equals 500. So I just typed over those numbers, and I took out 250, and I made it 125, and I took out 500, and I made it 250. So I made each of those numbers 50% smaller. I clicked save, and whew, voila, there was my image, half the size. So that's what I mean about knowing about coding. That's all I really need to know how to do. Basic information about how HTML works and how I can manipulate it to get the effects that I want. There's a wonderful quote by a technologist and educationalist and thinker called Douglas Rushkoff. And he says, if you don't learn to program, you will be programmed. You have got to understand the mechanics behind these things, or they manipulate you. I think he has a point to a certain extent. Okay, let's move on. I don't want to dwell on the other ones, just because we don't have that much time. But a focus on connections. Obviously, with the connected world that we now live in, literacies that focus on connections are absolutely fundamental. So we have personal, participatory, network, and intercultural. I just want you to think about personal literacy. What does that mean? How many of you have a Facebook or a Wegcontacte, is that how it's pronounced? Wegcontacte account? Could you hold up your hand? Yeah, pretty much everybody, yeah. Okay, so personal literacy here is, what do I look like on my social media account? What photo do I have of myself? What's my username? What's the image that I'm projecting? So the idea of online personal management or identity management. How do I do that? You probably know about this as adults, right? It's important the image that you want to bring across. Not just that, but if I'm uploading photos of my friends, should I ask permission first? Should I just upload it and tag them? If I'm the kind of person who likes uploading inspirational messages, which I have to say I'm not a fan. If I like uploading inspirational messages, shall I just tag all of my friends so that they get a notification in their, their status updates that there's a tagged picture? Well, in my opinion, that's spamming. So these kinds of behaviors online are important. It's not just knowing how to set up a Facebook account or knowing how to post a status update, which is easy. Okay, the last kind of area is a focus on, here it says, redesign. Focus on design or redesign. And here we have a literacy called Remix. And that's the one I want to come to in a minute and talk about in detail. But just before that, let's answer the question, why? Why is it important for us as educators to have a focus on digital literacies in our language teaching? A couple of experts first. Clay Shirky is an educational technologist. And this probably rings a bell with you, right? That feeling of, oh, yeah, I can never keep up. It's all changing so fast. You know, I've just learned how to use this tool and it's disappeared. Now what? Things are not going to slow down, by the way. They're going to speed up. So you need to be literate to a certain extent. It's not going to go away. And Mark Pegram, my colleague Gavin Dudney and myself recently wrote a book called Digital Literacies, and this is Mark's take. He's a lecturer in English language teaching at the University of Western Australia. So he's an English language teacher and trainer. So he kind of brings this into the language classroom again and talks about how this can make classes a bit more motivating and relevant. We'll come back to this point as well. Okay, so we looked at information literacy with the tree octopus, which is probably one of the most fundamental literacies, along with search literacy. And what I want to do now is to show you two activities that focus on this idea of remix. Now, if you've heard the term remix before, could you put up your hand? Okay, so not all of you. All right. Well, remix comes originally from music. So I don't know if people remember a group called the Sex Pistols from the 1970s. Could you put up your hand if you've heard of them? A few more of you. All right. They were a punk rock band in the 70s in Britain, popular at the time among punk rock fans. And they brought out a music single in 1975, I think it was, for the Queen's Silver Jubilee, and it was called God Save the Queen. If you've heard this song, could you put up your hand? Oh, a lot of you have. Okay, so it's a punk rock version of a kind of iconic British, what would you call it? Like not hymn, what would the word be? Like anthem, like an anthem. Is it the national anthem? It is, oh, there we go. Okay, sorry, I'm not British, so I don't have to know these things. Okay, so you can imagine the response in the press to a punk rock version, which has a bit of swearing in it. It's not very complimentary to the Queen. The reaction of many people was what? Good or bad? Yeah, I mean, the people were outraged, I think it would be fair to say, offended and outraged and horrified that this kind of, bastion of Britishness was being attacked. And this was an example of remix, where you took an original piece of music, God Save the Queen, and you mixed it up with a kind of punk rock style, and you changed it, and you created something new. And remix often has this interesting, edgy quality about it. You can produce new things, either music, images, video, which are slightly subversive. Not necessarily, always, but that's probably what's interesting about it, when it is slightly subversive. So, let's have a look at some new remix. Can you put up your hand if you recognize this? Pretty much everybody, yeah, okay. Now, this was a poster which apparently was used during the Second World War as a kind of a motivational poster, I guess, produced by the British government, and obviously to encourage people to keep calm. And there we have the British crown at the top. This kind of disappeared and it resurfaced in the year 2000. It was found in the attic, or one copy of it was found in the attic by somebody. And it kind of it was displayed in a bookshop nearby, and then it was kind of picked up. And a T-shirt appeared that had this. Yeah. So there we have a bit of remix on the right. And what I love is the upside-down crown. Then this went onto the internet and it became viral. So it spread everywhere. And you've probably seen all sorts of versions of this, what's called a meme. And they're lovely, aren't they? They're lovely. And the fact that you're laughing means you get the joke. Yeah, they're lovely, and kind of some of them are very subversive, some of them are just hilarious. I love that one. Keep coming. That's just great. Yeah. On the right-hand side, There's a link to a blog post there, so sideways. I've written a blog post about using this with students and exactly the stages you can go through with students. Because what's great about these memes and these internet remixes is, of course, that you yourselves and your students can produce these very easily. And there's a wonderful site which is called Keep Calm-O-Matic. Keep Calm-O-Matic. And if you, in fact, you're online or you have a device, you could actually produce one of these right now, put the EMF4 hashtag and post it to Instagram. It's a kind of an automatic website where you upload the picture here and then you put your own, keep and in there. And you can create your own. So obviously it's something students can very, very easily create, these internet memes, and then share, upload to the internet and share with a wider audience. So that's a very simple example of text and image-based remix that you can get your students doing. Okay, I want to show you another type of remix. This is slightly more sophisticated and uses videos. So if you've heard of a literal video, could you put up your hand? Just a few of you. All right, well, I won't tell you what they are. I'll show you an example. This picture here is of a very well-known movie. Do you know who? Harry Potter. Yeah, it's Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Okay. Now, if you love Harry Potter, if you're a Harry Potter fan, could you put up your hand? Okay, good. Yes, and you're putting up your hand proudly. I like that. Good. All right, if you hate Harry Potter, could you put up your hand? You're the minority. Sorry. Okay. If you couldn't care less about Harry Potter, could you put up your hand? The rest of you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I couldn't care less about him. But this video is very nice. Basically, the video takes the original movie trailer, the real thing, made by the movie company, and it creates a form of remix called a literal video. So I'm not going to tell you what it is, just watch it, and you'll get the idea of how it works. Okay? So the original Harry Potter trailer remixed as a literal video.
Introductory helicopter
Yes, it's wonderful, isn't it? I wish I could take the credit for having actually produced that, but that's beautifully, beautifully done. So you see what a literal video is. You have subtitles that literally describe what's happening on the screen or describe what's happening literally in front of your eyes. And there are loads of these on YouTube. So when you get home, if you just sit down and you go into YouTube and you write literal videos, I mean, that's it. The rest of your day will be gone. And you'll be watching these kinds of videos. They're absolutely hilarious. There are different genres. There's this kind where you take a movie section of a movie or a trailer of a movie. There's a brilliant one for Titanic, for example, that I used with students when the course book was doing a reading on Titanic. So we've got the movie literal video, and there are also music literal videos, which are also fantastic. So you know those, do you remember those 1980s pop videos that had those elaborate sets and the elaborate storylines? For example, there's a very famous song by Bonnie Tyler. Do you remember, with the big hair? She had that really famous song, Total Eclipse of the Heart, yeah. And there's a hilarious literal video of that, with Bonnie, doing her thing, but there's a voiceover with a literal video, and it's done in the same style and the same tune as the song. So there's some very, very professional literal videos out there. Okay, let's think about bringing this into the classroom, though. I think the first thing we want to do is show our students at least one example of a literal video, right? For example, the Harry Potter one or the Titanic one or whatever, a music video, it doesn't matter. You could choose something that matches the theme in your course book. There are lots of them. So students can watch the literal video, and you might set some kind of task for them, some kind of simple task. It could even be as simple as, watch the video, okay, now in pairs, 1 minute, how many words can you remember? Make a list, and then you can give them points. I would recommend not doing a gap fill. I sometimes have teachers say, yeah, okay, we could do that, and then we'd give them the text as a gap fill. But a gap fill with a video, I don't think is ever a very good idea. Think about when you're watching a video what you do. Would you have enjoyed a gap fill? No, you wouldn't have been able to watch the video. You would have been, right, you have to read, listen, write, all at the same time. And even for very proficient speakers, that is very cognitively demanding. And for students, it just ruins the video. I think if you're going to watch a video, watch the video, especially if it's a fantastic thing like this. I mean, let them enjoy it. You can tell them before, I say, okay, I'm going to see if you can, how many words you can remember or not. I quite like not giving them a task and then just springing something on it and then watching it again. And then in the second watching, you can start doing some language work of whatever description. Excuse me. So some sort of task where, you know, they watch the video, they get the idea of what a literal video is, perhaps some language work, and then after you've done that, what would you do next? Okay, maybe discuss, yeah, and then? Produce another one. Yes, the students produce a literal video. Thank you. Because this is what the 21st century is about. These days, it's extremely easy for students to do this. Of course, that is professionally produced. So to produce something that polished with a voiceover, maybe a little bit much, you know, in one single class, but they can certainly produce subtitles with or without a voiceover, possibly without for lower level students. So you're all looking at me going, It's not difficult to add subtitles to video now. There are a number of free tools online. For example, there's one called CaptionTube. CaptionTube. CaptionTube works with YouTube videos, and you go along to CaptionTube, I think it's .com, just Google it. CaptionTube, you put in the URL of the video you want to work on, let's say the trailer for Titanic. The trailer pops up, the original video, and then you just type in your subtitles here on the right and mark the times, and then you click save, and boom, there it is. So it's just not difficult to do anymore. CaptionTube is good, that works with YouTube videos. Another one is called Subtitle Horse. Horse as in the animal that you ride. Subtitlehorse.org. There's also a wonderful site that I've used with students which is called Bombay TV. Bombay TV is wonderful. It has really short clips, maybe half a minute, 1 minute, of Bollywood films. So they're in Hindi, these very short little bits, often dialogues. And then the site is already set up. So you have your clip here, you choose your clip, and then you just type in your subtitles. So students are not really producing well, they could produce a literal video, but you get them to kind of interpret the dialogue, which is in Hindi, so it's perfect. They can't understand it. So you're not distracted by the original meaning. You just overlay your own meaning. And that's a lot of fun, and also extremely easy to use. Video, type in, save, it gives you a URL, and that's your subtitled video. So technically, this is not difficult to do. And students can be very creative, I find, creating these sort of remixes. Excuse me. Okay. I want to leave you with just a thought by Henry Jenkins, who's an educationalist living in the States. Now, he works in mainstream schooling in the United States, mainly at secondary school level. Okay, so he's not talking about English language teachers, he's talking about mainstream secondary schooling. And this is what he says. Okay, those are very, very strong words. And he's not talking about us, or is he? I mean, I think what I hope I've shared with you today is that as English language teachers, we are very well placed to bring an emphasis on digital literacies into our language classrooms. It's very easy to marry up the two. Focus on language with a focus on specific digital literacies. And I hope I've given you 3 ways you can do this very simply. And I hope that you notice with each of the activities I've given you, the emphasis is on the language. It's not on the technology. The technology is simply a tool or a means to an end or a way to make the classes a little bit more engaging and also for students to share their work with a wider audience. Now, I've only had time to share 3 activities with you. Recently, my colleague Gavin Dudney and Mark Pegram and I wrote this book, Digital Literacies, in which we have 50 activities. I'm going to give you a link in the next slide where you can download more examples. So you've got the tree octopus there, and you've also got a couple more examples of activities I haven't had time to share with you, but that are focusing on specific digital literacies. So more things that you could try out with your students. And if you do try out anything with your students, please let me know. Get in touch with me through any of these ways. Here's the link to the Tree Octopus plus other resources. There's videos and all sorts of stuff, a couple of my favorite literal videos too. Let me know if you try out anything we've looked at today with your students and how they respond and what they produce. It's always nice to see actual student work. So I hope this has given you some food for thought. I hope it's inspired you to rush off and start integrating a bit of digital literacies into your classes. Thank you very much for coming, and thanks for listening.